Hey guys, how y'all doing? Okay, so what are we gonna do in this video today? We're gonna look at these Luce Student Essays, y'all. I can't tell you how many times I've shot this video. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Somebody comes to the door, they start ringing the doorbell, and the dogs go crazy. So here we go. Let's get started. Okay, so one of the big things that y'all should be annotating when we look at student essays is really back to this section right here. You've got to make sure that you're looking at the core of this essay. A lot of y'all are making annotations on the intro, which is great, great. They introduced with a broad thematic opener, then they introduced the context, the piece, and the author, and then they gave you a good thesis statement. That's awesome. But the whole purpose of the essay is this right here, making sure that they name a strategy or device, that they then provide evidence of that strategy and that device. They then maybe explain the evidence with some context to show the context of the evidence itself. But most importantly, they explain how that evidence is supposed to affect the audience. What would be better is if they even name the audience. And then after they've given the effect on the audience, they've given the piece of evidence itself, and they've named the strategy, they then explain how all of that contributes to the overall purpose of the piece. If you're not annotating for this, then you're not focusing on the purpose of rhetorical analysis. If we can't get this down, then we're not focusing on how you're going to pass that test. These are all suggestions for how to improve. These are all great things, but if you don't do this, then we're off task, okay? All right, so let's look at these essays. We already talked about one. It was boo-boo. Let's be honest. It was quite terrible. This one would be a 2 in my book. Yeah, it's bad. Let's look at essay 2 though. A lot of y'all, if you look at this, the yellow is the good stuff, the red is the bad stuff. If you look at the way that I've highlighted it, I'm going to go through it with you. The yellow is all the good. It's all the things that they did well, which means this is overwhelmingly on the rubric. It's a strong essay. Notice how the length of it is pretty well developed. That's something that y'all need to think about. How many paragraphs did you submit? You want to try to give me as many paragraphs as possible, but they need to be well developed. Just because you got 5 paragraphs doesn't necessarily mean that they're well developed. So just looking at the essay number doesn't tell you that it's necessarily good, but when you see that all of that stuff that's done well and the length of it makes me assume that it's good. Okay, so this one was actually an 8. Okay, so I'm going to go over this one with you first. Why? Because this one is hashtag goals. I will tell you though, if I'm being really honest with y'all, this one is not as good as 4 and 5. Essay 4 and 5 were your essays. 2 of y'all submitted these 2 essays to me for this timed writing, and they were beautiful. This one would have been an 8 or a 9, and this one was definitely a 9. One thing that you can tell why these essays are so much stronger is look at the length of that paragraph compared to this one right here. This one's a bigger font than, let me scroll. Essay 2 is a bigger font than what we have here, and it's still longer. That tells you that this kid definitely went in depth, had multiple pieces of evidence. For each piece of evidence, he explained the effect, he explained the purpose, connected everything perfectly, names his audience. I mean, it's such a beautifully written essay. It's well written. The analysis is strong. This one took some stylistic choices, which is what makes it a 9, because it's got style to it, it's got personality to it, and the analysis is still there. So this one was great. Loved it. Loved it. Multiple pieces of evidence throughout. You see that 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 pieces of evidence. They're all explained. They're all connected to the purpose and the effect. This is a great essay. We're going to go back up to 2 because this is the one that College Board said is an 8, so I want you to know what's good about it and what's bad about it. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. The speech. Okay, so why is that red? Because red means bad. I will tell you this. It's not necessarily bad. The problem is that it's not as thorough as it should be. It doesn't give the whole context. It should be the introduction to the speech. The introduction to the speech. That's specifics. That's the real context for this piece. What do we see from the get-go? Well, we can tell from the beginning they don't have a broad opener that brings in the reader at all. So it's not going to get the style choices that would bump it up a score. And that's a bad thing. But again, I've told y'all, if y'all are running low on time, this is good enough. It does the job. It doesn't do the job well, but it does the job, which is what matters at the end of the day. So the speech given by Claire Booth Luce, yay, they've named the audience. To the Women's National Press Club, yay, they've named, oh, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Yay, they've named the speaker, and yay, they've named the audience. So the speech given by Claire Booth Luce to the Women's National Press Club was controversial and even condemning of her audience at times, okay? So they've used passive voice right here. But more specifically, they've named the tone of the speech. So if we're really splitting hairs here, the speech itself that she gave to that group of people, to the journalists in the room, it was controversial and it was condemning. The intro to the speech, not so much. The intro to the speech was not controversial and condemning. It was more so humorous and flattering even at times. But the speech, so that's why it's correct. The speech itself was controversial and condemning. We're just not analyzing that right now. Why is this in red? Because it could be more specific. So it's not terrible, but you could always name your audience. Who is her audience? The journalist. However, we love those subtleties. We love the subtleties of you showing like, hey, this is the situation, but this is the subtleties that a lot of people don't notice. However, Luce pulls it off by gently preparing the audience for the criticism. So this is the purpose of her intro, preparing the audience for her criticism. So they've named the purpose of the piece. Why is pulls it off in red? Well, this is something that we need to talk about because a lot of people had this in their essays. Pulling it off is not something that you can literally do, and it's not something that Luce was literally doing. In your writing, you want to be as literal as possible, and she's not literally going to pull something off. It's a slang expression, so you do want to avoid those slang expressions that kind of take your essays down a peg. She employs, look at that good verbiage, love it. She employs the fact that you could have just deleted this. She employs the fact that they invited her there to speak. Okay, so that's her first strategy. What's her second strategy that she's analyzing? A strong consideration for their feelings. That's the second. And notice how she follows that format. Here is the first thing, invited her there to speak. Strong consideration for their feelings. That's what she analyzes right here. Praises their profession. She also analyzes that, and a clear plea for open-mindedness. So her thesis lays out the 4 strategies that she's going to analyze. The 4 strategies that Luce employs. This is a beautifully written and thesis statement. And look at that. Y'all know I love a colon or a dash or some kind of different punctuation mark. It sets you aside and it makes it evident that you could do more than just a period. So she opens the speech with a paradox about being happy and challenged. First, saying she is flattered and honored. Then she flips her original statement saying she is less happy than you may think. So she opens the speech. So that's my transition so that I know where we're looking at in the speech itself. She names the device and the strategy. She tells me exactly what she's analyzing, and then she gives the evidence of it. Why is this in red? Because it's passive voice. And honored. She is flattered and honored. That should be the end of the sentence, or it should have a semicolon. So there's a grammatical error right there. Then she flips her original statements, saying she is less happy than you may think. Right off the bat, okay, so we've got that slang right there. So her integration of evidence is flawless right here. It's great. Everything smoothly flows grammatically with her writing. She's not doing that basic so-and-so stated and then throwing in the quote. She's actually integrating it into her sentence. The next sentence, let's read this one together. Right off the bat, Luce gives her audience signs that her speech is not going to be 100% positive. Okay, so she's explaining this part right here. Off the bat, it's slang. Luce gives her audience. Who is her audience? Just name them. That's all. That's all you have to do. Name the audience specifically. Journalists. and they're explaining her strategy, that Luce is basically setting us up that this is not going to be a positive speech that she's about to give. But we shouldn't start a sentence with a conjunction. You know, conjunctions, functions are to combine sentences, not to start them. But then so just delete it. Then she makes sure to remind them that they have asked for her opinion on what is wrong with the American press. Again, beautiful integration of evidence. It grammatically flows, and she names the specific audience. That's great. Within her first paragraph, Luce makes her intentions clear before even stating her argument. So this is the strategy. She's going back to the effect of this little part right here. So notice how she's got three pieces of evidence. Three pieces of evidence. It's not just one piece of evidence. She's got three strong pieces of evidence. She explains the effect of them to make her intentions clear before she even states them. And this is the purpose of them. She confirms that they are aware that they asked for this criticism. Okay, so that goes back and explains all of the effect and the purpose of each piece of evidence. The one thing that I don't like is what I want you to do is after each piece of evidence, I want you to explain when she says the word that she's flattered, how is that supposed to affect the audience? Well, it's supposed to make them feel proud that this person is flattered to be in front of them. It gives them a little bit of pride in themselves. And for what overall goal is she using that word flatter, that she's flattered to be here? Well, what is the overall goal of that? You want the audience to feel good about themselves before you start to criticize them. That way they're more opening to listening to what you have to say. I would rather you give the effect and the purpose after each piece of evidence. That would be my criticism of this one. She shoves three different pieces of evidence and she waits until the end to explain the effect and then the purpose of the overall pieces of evidence. That's my criticism. But overall, it's okay. It's good. Let's look at our next paragraph. In the second paragraph, so now again, that's her transition right there. In the second paragraph, Luce uses self-deprecation to show her audience a difficult situation she is in. First and foremost, y'all can tell by the red line, this isn't a word. She should have also named her audience. But this is the strategy. Luce is showing us the difficult situation she is in. That's great. That is one of Luce's strategies. She acknowledges her own position, which exposes the follies and sins of her listeners. Okay, beautiful integration of evidence. Luce gives them a slight idea of the criticism that is to come, comparing herself to an arbitrary banquet speaker who shares the same difficult task. Okay, so we've got the evidence again, smoothly integrated. This is a beautiful vocabulary word right there. Any elevation that you can provide in your writing is strong, makes it stronger. So it's talking about the whole purpose of this entire introduction. What is it supposed to do? It's supposed to give them an idea of the criticism that is to come, but not necessarily state it word for word. It says that she is comparing herself to an arbitrary banquet speaker. That's where she shows this self-deprecation. Her strategy that she's saying is that Luce is self-deprecating at times, saying that she is an arbitrary banquet speaker. So she's almost like putting herself down in front of this group of people. Arbitrary means that it doesn't matter. So she herself doesn't matter. But that she's here to do a difficult task just like them, or just like a regular banquet speaker. Next, Luce employs some humor by saying that she is not the best candidate for the delicate art of giving an audience hell, but rather perhaps public figures, Billy Graham and Bishop Sheen would succeed at it. So notice how all of this connects. She is an arbitrary banquet speaker. Billy Graham and Bishop Sheen are religious pastors, but specifically they would be huge speakers. They would do a really good job at delivering any type of information. It's also a pun. All of this correlates together. Banquet speaker. She is less of a stronger speaker than these individuals right here because they do it all the time. And what do these dudes do? They talk about hell all the time. So they would be better at giving the audience hell. That then goes back to that idea of self-deprecation. She's putting herself down, but using it in a humorous way. Again, you've got your passive voice, and this one's not spelled correctly. The integration of the evidence is smooth. She explains the strategy of the self-deprecation this way, acknowledging her own position, her own follies and sins, but also showing it in a more humorous way down here. Her lighthearted and self-deprecating approach, again, naming the strategy, but also what I loved about this, the tone that she shows to her approach. Any type of additional details that you can give in rhetoric makes it stronger. So her lighthearted and self-deprecating approach makes the audience more likely to accept her claims, or at least hear her out. Okay, so why do I love this? This is her bringing it back to the overall purpose of the piece. Her lighthearted, meaning her humor right here, her self-deprecation that we saw up here, all of this makes her audience more likely to accept her claims or at least hear her out. This is great. How could they have made it stronger? They could have actually conveyed the tone of her claims. So more likely to accept her critical reception of them later in her speech. But this is the overall purpose. So she's given me the 3 pieces of evidence, again, just like this one, 3 pieces of evidence. She's then explained to me the effect that it's supposed to have on the audience. It's supposed to be humorous. It's supposed to be self-deprecating. And then this is the purpose. What is it supposed to do? It's supposed to make them hear her out. Okay, so let's look at the next body paragraph. As Luce continues her speech again, she reminds them of her invitation and then prepares them for harsh words by complimenting their careers and their standards of writing. So this is the strategy we're going to look at today, reminding them of her invitation and preparing them for the harsh words and their standards of writing. She warns them that it is not to be sugarcoated. I like the specifics here, but it's the slang that bothers me, because they are an audience of journalists and they would all see through any attempt to do so. Again, perfect integration of evidence. Her praise of their intelligence, so this is her explaining the strategy that she's using. Her praise of their intelligence automatically pleases the audience. So there's our effect right there. And what does it do? What's the purpose of that? To make them more willing to listen to the argument. Again, perfect layout. We've got 2 pieces of evidence that are smoothly integrated. You've got the immediate effect on the audience of it and the immediate purpose of that effect. Please the audience. Why? So that they'll be willing to listen to what you have to say. Okay? Final sections of her introduction. So that's a good little transition, but also kind of lets me know where I'm looking in the speech or the intro to her speech. Through the final sections of her intro, Luce carefully plants the definition of journalism. I love the specific word choice here. She plants, meaning it's a unique use of verbiage right here, but also those adverbs that give details about how you do it, and those adjectives, that final sections of her intro. All of that is what I really want to see. I want you to work on adding in more details about the rhetoric that's being used. Convey the tone, convey the attitude as much as possible. So Luce carefully plants the definition of journalism: the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. Again, this is a different way of introducing your evidence. It's not integrating evidence, it's introducing it, but they're using it in a more of a unique way with the colon right there. While this statement pertains to her overall argument that journalists do not always state the truth, so she's addressing the truth, that this is her overall argument right here, pursuit of and effort. This is her overall argument of her speech, that they don't do this. She does not outright accuse them of this. What I love about this student is that they notice the subtlety of this. The pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. The whole purpose of her speech that's about to come in is to say that they're not stating the truth. But she notices the subtlety that she does not outright accuse them of this. Why? Because that would put off her audience. So she subtly tells them what they're supposed to be doing to insinuate that they're not doing it. Instead, she merely introduces a commonly shared opinion on journalism. Okay, so this is the strategy that she's using. She's explaining that evidence right there. Why did I highlight the on in red? Because it's not used correctly. It should be introduces a commonly shared opinion of journalism. It's just the wrong preposition. By waiting to argue it further, Luce gets her audience on board. I just want elevation and specificity here. That's why I highlighted it in red. By waiting to argue what further? Tell me, what are you talking about? Elevate this one. Gets and gots is lower level vocabulary. Audience, name them. On board, another cliche expression. So Luce gets her audience on board that truthfulness and honesty are their primary concerns. Again, explaining the purpose of that evidence. This is great. I love that this student used this. This is really intelligent. This student used this appositive clause right here, but they're also explaining why this is effective, how this affects the audience with their own if-then logic. So this is really strong. They're using rhetoric to explain why her rhetoric right here is convincing. It's really great. If the audience agrees with this statement, which they should, since that is part of their journalistic oath, then she will have already won half the battle to showing them journalism's faults. Okay, this is a really strong way of explaining why this piece of evidence is effective to this specific audience. That's what you want to work on, guys. Why is this particular piece of evidence particularly effective to this specific audience? Okay, and that's smoothly explained right here. All right, so let's look at their conclusion. It was obviously rushed. It does the basic job. It goes back to the overall purpose of the piece right here. Her opening statements. She is creative, careful, and aware when presenting her opening statements. And then it goes back to the thesis. She prepares the audience well by appealing to their feelings, being considerate of their professional efforts, and through a plea for open-mindedness from a journalist-based audience. Again, this one is an 8. This one is a good essay. It's well developed. Look at the how many body paragraphs? We got 4 body paragraphs. We've got concise intro, concise conclusion. This is strong. This is a really well-written essay. It's missing some things, and it's definitely got some errors. There's some spelling errors, some passive voice, but it really holds no candle compared to 5 and 4. So if you're looking at what you really want to be able to write like, it's these 2 student essays right here. These are so strong. All right, and I will be coming to you in just a second on student essay 3.